This afternoon. We're excited to talk to you today about National Board Certification. This webinar is for people just getting started, looking for information about this process that hopefully will help you make a decision to do this or to figure out a good time to do it. So if you're already involved in National Board or working on your submissions, you might find this not what you need. So just want to make sure everybody's in the right place. My name is Nikki Vredenberg, and I am the Director of Education at Montana PBS, joined by my friend Xavier Riddle in the background, as you can see. We have an event tomorrow. He's coming with me. I got my National Board Certification in 2014 when I was teaching in a classroom, an elementary classroom just outside of Bozeman at Lamont School. And I have the early and middle childhood language arts and literacy certification. And I will let my colleague introduce herself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Gaines, and I am currently working in the curriculum department in Bozeman. And I certified in 2017 when I was teaching second grade at Meadowlark Elementary here in Bozeman. And I am an early childhood generalist is my certification area.
Marco, I see you hopped on. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I came on just for the beginning of this because I just wanted to greet everybody. My name's Marco Farrell. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Professional Development at MFPE, and this is one of the programs that we've sponsored since the program came to Montana in 1997. It's been our pleasure to facilitate candidates and to recruit candidates, and so we're just happy that you're here. I want to thank both Nikki and Christy for doing this today, and we're going to do a series of these. So if you have friends that want to jump on, we're trying to do one a month at alternating times after school and in the evening, and so we hope you can do that. This sort of replaces, a couple of years ago I did 5,500 miles across the state of Montana doing these workshops, and probably got just about as many people as are sitting here tonight. So it's kind of nice to be able to do this online, and it's great that you're doing it. So thanks, Nikki and Christy, for doing this. And I'll just kind of hop off here, but I just want to welcome everybody.
Yeah, so we have a link right here, bit.ly/NBC webinar. So that will take you to this slide deck. And so if you want to come back and revisit any of this, some links are embedded into the slide deck as well. We also are recording this, and that after we finish, we hope to get it posted on the MFPE website.
It will be.
Back and listen to things again or share with colleagues that may have missed it. But we have a little presentation plan for you, but we are also really here to answer your questions as well. So feel free to get our attention and get those questions answered, because we really do want you to walk away feeling like you have all the information you need to pursue this. And
Nikki, if you need me for anything, I'll be in the office. Just text me and I can hop back on. So.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Marco.
You guys have fun. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, with that, I'll let Christy move on. I'm going to advance to the next slide and let her take over.
Sounds great. And I will just reiterate, if you have any questions as we're covering things, don't hesitate to stop me and ask when it's relevant. So the first few slides are just a little bit of background knowledge on the national boards. So the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards is a nonprofit organization, and it's committed to the advancing accomplished teaching for all students, and it's been evolving over the last 33 years. And again, this covers some of that same piece we just talked about, but it's a respected professional certification available to those in K-12 education. And it's established by teachers for teachers in order to develop, retain, and recognize accomplished teachers and their teaching practices. So rather than read you everything on this slide, I'll let you just kind of peruse it as well. But just a few things to know. The standards for national boards were developed by teachers, although not all of them are nationally board certified teachers, as well as other experts in the field. So for example, they pulled in early childhood educator expertise in order to design the one that I did around early childhood education. They also involve people from teacher preparation programs. More and more schools, as well as university preparation programs, are turning to this framework that's covered by the National Board in order to provide ongoing professional development. So you may have even seen some of these pieces that we'll show you tonight in other areas. So this slide just kind of goes over those ever-changing numbers with National Board certification. We believe we found the most recent numbers, but more and more teachers are certifying every year. So across the nation, over 112,000 teachers have achieved board certification. More than half of those teach in high-needs schools. And right now there are over 20,000 more teachers currently in the process of pursuing National Board certification. And, sorry, trying to advance slides on my end here as well. So this is just an interesting slide. 81% of Americans believe that teachers should be nationally board certified, when as done in a Gallup poll. Let's look at some Montana numbers. So currently there are 166 certified teachers in Montana. There may be more, but if teachers don't hook themselves up to the Montana platform, we don't necessarily know that they are NBCT. So tonight we're going to talk to you a little bit about the process, but it's important to notice that MFPE is providing more and more support for people pursuing certification every year. We now have a process where you can go through Jumpstart, which we'll talk about at length in a few slides. And then there's also ongoing support modules that are now being offered to help support candidates in the process. So it's getting easier and easier to do this. I also love that the three of you are on the webinar together from Helena, as you will find that having a team to help makes a big difference.
Definitely. Highly recommend that.
Highly recommended. This is just a quick slide to kind of show you where nationally board certified teachers fall around the state of Montana. I love this slide because the first time I saw it, it looked very different. Our numbers are rapidly growing across the state. The additions in eastern Montana are very recent, so that's exciting. And for those of you in the Helena area, you'll see that there's quite a cluster of people in that area, which is great news when you're looking for support. Rebecca, I see you've joined us. Where are you from?
Sorry, I just had to unmute my computer. I'm teaching in Belgrade right now.
Belgrade, great. So there's also several people in the Bozeman and Belgrade area available to help you as well.
Lots of support available.
Yes.
So I think this is mine. So the big question that you probably want answered today is, why should I do this? And we're going to give you some what we think is compelling information, but ultimately you'll have to come up with that why on your own. But they've done a lot of research around this process, and what they've found is that kids who are taught by National Board Certified teachers achieve more. And that the impact of having a board certified teacher is greater for especially for our minority and low income students. So basically it's good for kids is the long-term reason. The other piece is that we know that board certified teachers are the best at what they do. It's not just a professional development program. It really is a very transformative professional development experience, because it's really about these kids, this setting. So it really is the most relevant professional development experience you can do. And a lot of teachers say that it was actually more impactful than a master's degree, because it was work they did in their classrooms with their students, developing and reflecting on the work that they did with their kids. And so the kids that they worked with while they were going through certification benefited the most. That being said, this quote is relevant. It is hard, but all things that are worth it are usually hard, because it is a lot of work and it does require pushing yourself way out of your comfort zone and thinking about your practice in a way that maybe you haven't had a chance to think about it before. Whoops. Going back to this one, NBC is just the beginning as well when it comes to becoming a teacher leader, maybe in your own community as well as in your own state. Many of our NBCs go on to be on state and national committees. They present at national conferences. They become leaders within their districts. This is sort of the graphic that the NBC has put together to just really show that board certification is the road to becoming a teacher leader. I would argue that a lot of our board certified teachers come to the process already as teacher leaders, and that's what calls them to do this. So I don't necessarily know that it's a linear path, but I do think that doors open and opportunities present themselves when you become a board certified teacher that weren't things you would have realized. And my own story is I was a K-1 teacher at a little rural school in Bozeman, Montana, outside of Bozeman, Montana. And after I became board certified, I guess 6 years ago, now I'm the director of education for a public media outlet, which is not something I ever would have expected. But once you learn more about leadership and working with educators in different ways, new opportunities open themselves up to you. So not to say that board certification leads you out of the classroom, but Christy and I have both had opportunities to lead in the profession in different ways because of pursuing board certification. So I'll let Christy talk about the 5 core propositions. And Christy, just boss me around and tell me when to advance slides. I think you're muted though.
Thank you, Nikki. I was muted. So one of the documents you will want to peruse as you're jumping into this is a short publication called What Teachers Should Know and Be Able to Do. It was first written in 1989 and they just actually redid it in 2016. And it articulates these 5 core propositions that are at the heart of national boards. It's based around teachers being committed to the students and their learning, having a deep understanding of the subjects we teach and how to teach those subjects, around the idea that teachers are responsible for managing and monitoring student learning, that we think systematically about our practice and learn from our experiences, and that we're members of learning communities. So if Nikki will advance to slide 1, we'll jump in and just talk a little bit more about proposition 1. Rather than read those bullet points out to you, I'll give you a moment to just read them for yourself. Nikki, do you want to go ahead and go on to the next slide? Okay, proposition 2, all around the idea that we appreciate knowledge in the subjects, how it's created, organized, and linked to other disciplines. That it takes specialized knowledge about how to convey these subjects, and that we know how to generate multiple paths to knowledge for the differing students we have in our classrooms. Let's head to 3. Okay, 3 is all about being responsible for managing and monitoring student learning. So pieces of this are assessment, setting instructional goals, thinking about varied learning in different settings and groups, and how to engage students in their learning process. Proposition 4 is about thinking systematically about practices and learning from experience. It really gets to the heart of those difficult choices we have to make in our classroom every day as teachers in order to help students grow and thrive, and how we use feedback and research to improve our practice both for students and for ourselves. And proposition 5 is about teachers being members of professional learning communities. I do think it's important to note here that this may be within your building, but especially in a state like Montana where many of us are serving in rural districts, you can get creative with where your learning community is coming from. I spent a lot of time talking about relationships I've created with teachers through platforms like Twitter. So that's certainly a piece of this as well. Okay, so once you wrap your head around these 5 core propositions, if you recognize that they match your own beliefs, that would be a great sign that this process is for you. The next step they've taken is to build those 5 core propositions into this helix for what accomplished teaching looks like, called the architecture of accomplished teaching. And so it's just the idea that you would take that commitment to students and their learning, and from there you would take it to set high worthwhile goals for your students, and head into proposition 3 about managing and monitoring student learning, so that you can then think systematically about your practice and how that's going to affect your instruction and the goals you're setting for instruction, which takes you then to the 5th core proposition about thinking about systematic instruction and how you can reach out to others to help you support all of that. Nikki, feel free to jump in if you have a way of explaining the helix better. It's
no, that you did a great job. I think that the layman's way of saying this is you're probably already doing it. This is probably an average hour in your classroom. It's going through all of these processes, and National Board is about deliberately extracting each of those steps and writing about it. And so just noticing what you're already doing, and as we talk about the requirements for what you have to bring to this, you could probably find places where this helix just happens over and over and over again throughout your day. Okay. So the next part is the standards, and the point of this process is to build a portfolio that proves that you know how to meet the national standards for teaching, and they're based on those 4 core propositions, but then itemized and created specific to your grade level and content area. There are 16 different subject areas and 4 developmental levels, so that you can decide which certificate and which standards work best for you and your teaching setting. So, oops, I hit the wrong thing here. Oh, heavens, stop. Oh, why is it? My mouse decided silly.
Can I interrupt and say what is a developmental level? Is that elementary, middle school, high school, or cognitive?
Nikki, why don't you answer that while you're working on your mouse?
Here we go. Here they go.
Ah, perfect.
So you'll see here, these are the certificate areas and then the developmental levels that exist in those certificate areas. You can see that there's a nice broad range. So early and middle childhood is children ages 3 to 12. So that covers our early and upper elementary. And then we can get into the next grade, the age is 11 to 18. So there's a lot of choices here. If you're an elementary teacher, you have a couple more choices because you can go with the generalist.
What, 11 to?
Math, 11, 15.
So what does E and C mean?
That's early and middle childhood.
Oh, I didn't mute it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then AYA is adult, young adult.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then you can see we're in music and physical education. You know, we have K-12 music and physical education teachers. So that's why we have like the option to be both early and middle and a young adult all in one certificate area. So once you find your content area, then find the age group that you work with. And that's how you figure out which certificate you should pursue. It's advised that you pick a certificate area that you think you're going to be in that context for, oops, I don't know what I did there, that you're going to be in that context for a few years, at least for as long as you plan on working on this. So it's important to let your principal know that you're planning to do this. So if they're likely to shift people around or reassign you, you want to make sure that your context stays the same throughout certification. Once you finish this process, your certificate is good for 5 years, and then you have to do what's called a maintenance of your certificate. And when you maintain, or we used to say recertify, but now we say maintain. When you maintain your certificate, you'll also need to be in the same context and developmental level that you originally certified.
So you have to do it again in 10 years?
5 years.
It's a much different process, the maintenance. It isn't all 4 components, and it really focuses on reflecting on what you've done since certification.
So if I'm a special education teacher, would I do the exceptional needs specialist?
Yeah, I think that would be, and you go from birth to 21 years on that one. So yeah, that would probably be, but you wouldn't have to. You would, right, Chrissy? She could do generalist or any of those content areas.
Yes, I believe so. With each of them, there are some specifications about what grade level you have to be teaching or the number of students that need to be in the age range. So I think if you have further questions about that, we can direct you to the documents where they give those specifics, so you can find those details.
I'm noticing like math, it only starts at age 11.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing in the elementary school. I'm in the middle school, so that would work for me, but is there a reason why it doesn't go younger than that? Or older than, well, it does with the young adult, is it?
Oh,
18
I see.
plus.
Yeah, so most of the elementary teachers don't just teach math, they also teach all the other subjects too. So that's why they go for the generalist, and so that has them creating components within multiple content areas. So a lot of them will probably have a math component to their portfolio, as well as reading and literature and science. Does that sound right, Christy?
Yes, absolutely. I had math woven throughout all 4 of my components as an early childhood generalist.
You guys have any other questions? No? Okay, we'll move on here. So to be eligible for National Board, you have to have a bachelor's degree. You have to have at least 3 years of teaching under your belt. You have to have a state teaching license. And your prerequisite, you might have some additional prerequisites depending on what certificate you're going for. For instance, you may have to prove you're a PE teacher if you go for the PE certificate. I think there's a document that your principal signs to help you with that documentation. The components, this is still me, right, Christy?
Go, I think my name's on the slide, but you keep going if you're on a roll.
I do that. I get on a roll and I forget I'm supposed to.
Right. Absolutely. So we've alluded a couple of times to the components. No matter which one of those certification areas you choose, you're going to end up covering 4 different components. You'll notice we have them grouped into 2 different sections. Component 1 is an assessment about your content knowledge. And what it's important to know about assessment 1 is it is administered at a computer-based testing center. I believe the 2 in the state are in Helena and Billings. So it may mean you have to do some travel to take this assessment. And they're always scheduled sometime between April and mid-June. So that's just something to keep in mind. The other 3 components are all portfolio entries. So component 2 is a writing component. It's all about differentiation and instruction based upon the area of certification you're focused on. Component 3 is about your teaching practice and learning environment. And part of your documentation for that component are videos that you take of yourself teaching in the classroom, and then you write to reflect on those videos. And then component 4 is also a writing component about being an effective and reflective practitioner. And so those are all submitted electronically. Usually you work on those throughout the school year, and then you're able to submit those in April. And usually the deadline for having those submitted is around May 15th. I believe it's the 18th this year. So you would have all of this completed. when we'll talk a little bit about how many years you can take to do these different parts and pieces, but once you have them all in, you receive scores usually in December of the school year following when the submission has happened. So any questions about the timeline? That can be a little confusing. Let's keep going, Nikki, if there aren't any questions.
Hold on a second.
I do have a question about the timeline. So when do you have to do them in order? So like component 1 is in mid-June, but then April and May for the other portfolio. So do you have to do them in order?
Great question. No, you don't. And matter of fact, now that I've been through the process, I think it's kind of unfortunate that they've labeled the assessment component 1, because I found that as I was doing my writing and studying and becoming more effective with components 2 through 4, it set me up to be much more effective on the assessment. It was like studying for it through those components. So no, you can take them all in 1 year, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit, in which case you're likely going to take the assessment after you've submitted the other 4. But even if you take it across multiple years, I would still recommend leaving component 1 for later.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what's great about this process, is that you really get to decide how to do it and how long to spend on it and which ones to do first and how to divide it up and make sure that it matches with what your plans are for the year anyway. It's a lot. There's a lot of choice involved here.
Yes. Okay, so component 1, back to that assessment piece. What's important to know about it are it's developed around 2 different areas. So the first half of the assessment, you have about 30 minutes to take, and you have about 90 minutes to take. It's 3 30-minute constructed response items. So usually you're responding to some type of prompt and doing some type of open-ended response. And then the second half of component 1's assessment is a 60-minute multiple choice type selected response test. Thank you. Component 2, I mentioned, was a writing component, and it really gives you an opportunity to highlight that you recognize your students' learning strengths and needs for improvement. Usually you select 2 to 4 students and kind of show the progression of their learning through a portfolio entry. You include samples of student work in order to provide evidence of that growth. And then you do a lot of analysis about how you recognize what students need and how you can show that students grew through the process. Component 3 is that one that includes the 2 videos, and it's showing how you interact with your students as well as the classroom setting that you've created. And you write 2 written commentaries, 1 to go with each video. Component 4 is one we talked about earlier that they've done a lot of rewriting in the last several years, and component 4 is one that sounds like it's changed the most from the past. I had several people give me advice to hold off and save it for last because it was the fastest and easiest one, and I didn't find that to be at all true in the next process. So I caution people to not tell people that anymore. It really is a, go ahead, Nikki.
So fast and easy. None of them are fast.
None of them are fast and easy. But I certainly went into it with that perspective based on feedback from others. So if someone else tells you that, don't let them tell you that. There's several parts to it. It's all about being effective and reflective. So there's a large chunk of assessment piece in there. You also talk a lot about the personal learning communities you're part of and how you participate with those.
As well as
almost all writing.
Community and family partnerships, and where you, this might be what things that you do outside of your regular instructional day, documenting any of that extra stuff that you do that is also builds toward your work as a professional educator.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. So once you submit everything in May and or take the assessment in June, then scoring takes place. And it's the reason it takes so long to get scores back, because each piece of writing is hand scored by at least 1 or 2 people. If there are discrepancies, they have extra people score it as well. They go through a long process of learning how to be trained in order to do so correctly and ensure that there is consistency in scoring. Let's see, there we go. We talked about this a little bit, but you already asked, they can be taken in any orders. You have 3 years to submit all 4 components at least 1 time. You can submit any number of components in those first 3 years. You can take up to 5 years if you don't certify in those first 3 to continue retakes. And you must complete each component during the cycle in which it's purchased. And then you may end up repurchasing components if you decide you would like to retake.
I think this is important to bring up. When I did this, what feels like forever ago now, the expectation was you did it all in 1 year, all 4 components in 1 year, and you paid for it, and that was it. And many of us, myself included, were not passing the first time. I did not pass the first time and had to resubmit 2 components again and pay for it. And since then, they've really tried to slow people down and say, don't expect yourself to do this all in 1 year. Do a couple of components a year and take your time. And it took me 2 years. That's the reality. And a lot of teachers, I think that 2 to 3 years is just a whole lot more realistic because of the amount of time that has to go in this. Obviously, the faster you go through it, the cheaper it is. But for me, I had to redo it anyway, so I wasn't, going in with the idea of saving money didn't help me out at all. These are our deadlines. So you have to start by registering on the National Board of Professional Teachers website and creating an account with a password and a username and all that good stuff. And you have to register with them and tell them that you're planning to do this. And I believe there's a fee there, right, Christy? It's a fee once a year. I think it's $75 that you pay once a year. So that's the other piece, that the longer it takes, every year you have to pay that $75 fee. So there is a benefit to getting done faster. You can change components. You can see all the deadlines. If you change your mind, you decide to do something else, but you have to get in there and say, I'm going to do this component, and this is what I'm going to submit when it's time. And then you have April 1st to May 13th is your window to submit those things, and it's done electronically. When I did it, it was something we mailed in, so things have really improved. Like a cardboard box I had to take to the post office. And then the renewal scores and the initial score releases happen in December, so that's kind of how we're working through on that. So then this is the breakdown. Each component costs $475. And then you pay that $75 registration fee. So if you think about it, if you did it in 1 year, it is only going to cost you $19.75. 2 years, $20.50. 3 years, $21.25. So this is basically, but you're only going to pay per component. So if you don't have to cough up this entire amount right away. It's something to think about. You also get, no matter what, for completing the process, you get these 60 OPI renewal units, and those come from MFPE. And that's what you would need to recertify your teaching license. And then we'll talk a little bit about, there are some districts that are offering support, local banks that are offering loans to teachers who want to do this. It's just a matter of getting involved with your union representative to find out what are the benefits that your local region offers to support teachers in this area. You probably know about the legislation that passed recently to give teachers stipends for finishing this, and depending on your area and the type of school you're in, the state will match. Your district has to put up something, a minimum of $500, and then the state will match it. Some schools, if they're identified as high needs, it's a stipend up to $2,000. And that's every year for the life of your certificate, which is 5 years. So you will get your money back for this process and then some. You just have to wait it. You just have to do it. Invest on the front end. So, okay, let me see if this is my slide or not.
I've lost track. Nikki, tell me.
Christy's.
Okay, I think I'm back on for this one. Okay, so once you decide that National Board Certification is for you, the first step would be to read through this National Board Candidate Guide, and we'll make sure you have these links. And decide on a certificate area and kind of peruse the standards for that area. And if you still feel like this is the right step, we really highly recommend attending Jumpstart. Jumpstart is a 3-day face-to-face offering in either Billings or Missoula every summer, where we will really dive deep with you into each of the components, help you decide maybe which components you're going to take if you don't want to take all 4 the first year, and really just set you up to be ready to jump into the process. Jumpstart is run through MFPE, and so the first step would be to create that account Nikki mentioned with the National Board and pay your $75 registration fee. This gives you access to all of the documents you're going to need to be successful at Jumpstart, so that's why you would pay that $75 fee first. Once you attend Jumpstart, then you could go back and register for the components you're going to take. If you remember from that timeline document, you really have until February to do that. So you have all the way from summer when you can make your plan at Jumpstart through February to make sure that you are ready to commit to the ones you're going to commit to for that year. And then you would pay for those individual components.
I think that's the end of the information. So now we can take any questions that you might have. So if questions come up later, this is a contact information for Marco, me, or Christy, and the National Board website. And you are encouraged to reach out and get any of those questions answered. And then our last slide is here about just a little bit more information about Jumpstart. Highly recommend going through Jumpstart if you're committed to doing this in the next school year. Christy, you help with the one in Missoula, right?
In Billings.
You help with the one in Billings. So Christy, you'll get to meet Christy in person, which I think is
yes
enough, right? And that it does cost, Jumpstart does cost fee, right?
It does. I apologize. I skipped right over that piece. Yes, if you're an MFPE member, it costs, let me see if I have this in my notes somewhere. I thought I did. Okay, there it is. If you're an MFPE member, Jumpstart costs $200, and again, that's for all of the materials and the 3 days of face-to-face training. If you are not an MFPE member, it costs $500 for those 3 days.
So I have to invest a little bit to get that Jumpstart. And then did you want to talk a little bit about your ongoing support that you've been working on this year?
Sure. One of the brand new things to Montana are these ongoing support modules. Your investment in Jumpstart also then signs you up for those support modules. And what happens is for 2 hours every month, we jump on a webinar and present on different topics along the way. You have the option to opt in. So for example, there are some that are very component specific. So if you are attempting certain components, you would likely want to hop on that support session. Others are meant to cover everything. They also give you an opportunity mid-process to ask questions that have come up along the way and get advice for the things you're running into as you're attending through this process.
Great. All right, well, does anybody have any questions for us? Doesn't look like it. All right. Well, as we said, please reach out if you have any questions. This recording will be posted in the next few days on the MFPE website, and feel free to reach out. And thank you so much for making the time to join us today. And oh, do you have a question?
No,
No, just waving.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you.
That was confusing. Sorry.
No worries. We hope that you'll decide to do national boards. So thanks so much for giving us your time today.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
So